They saw the silences move by and beckon, saw the forms, the very beards of burly storms, and heard them talk like sounding seas. They saw the snowy mountains rolled and heaved along the nameless lands like mighty billows, saw the gold of awful sunsets, saw the blush of sudden dawn, and felt the hush of heaven when the day sat down and hid his face in dusky hands. Joaquin Miller. It has a name now, a storied one bespeaking the national saga of a great people. And that name is marked on a map, but it was not always so. It is a place of mist and mystery. Shaped by natural forces of both creation and destruction. Some 245 million years ago, the collision of the African plate with the North American plate buckled the landscape above, creating a chain of magnificent mountains running down the spine of eastern North America. Then water and wind melted these mighty pinnacles, rounding and softening them, disguising their majesty under a carpet of green. As the forces within the earth pushed the Cumberland Mountains skyward, a swift creek cut a break, a great V-shaped notch into the rock. The creek left a gap, a passageway used by animals over the centuries in their migration beyond the mountains. Men sought out these animals, hunting them for food, for clothing, and for a sustenance both physical and spiritual. From the land north of the Ohio River come Shawnees, Delawares, and Miamis, and from the south come Cherokees and Creeks. They follow the buffalo traces to salt licks and rich hunting grounds north of the Gap. In time, they battle each other for this hunting ground, and raiding parties move through the Gap against their enemies. The path they make comes to be called the Path of the Armed Ones, or the Warrior's Path. To the east live other people. They have come from Europe and from Africa to this new land. The mountains form a great barrier chain which they cannot pass. The laws of Great Britain, the hostility of the natives with their French allies to the west, and the sheer majesty of these formidable mountains all conspire to hem them in to the east. Yet among them are those bold enough to challenge both nature and its native peoples. One of the first is a man of many talents. Dr. Thomas Walker is a physician, merchant, farmer, land speculator, and surveyor. He is now to become an explorer. The British Crown has awarded the Loyal Company 800,000 acres of western land, and the company has selected Walker to explore this new domain. With 5 companions, he travels west on horseback in the spring of 1750. From Charlottesville, Virginia, the little party travels up the valleys of the Holston, Clinch, and Powell's rivers to the Warrior's Path and the Gap. On April 13, 1750, he notes the great pathway in his journal, and that others, both native and white, have been there before him.
We went 4 miles to a large creek, which we called Cedar Creek, and from thence 6 miles to Cave Gap. On the top of the ridge are laurel trees marked with crosses, others blazed, and several figures on them. A beech stands on the left hand, on which I cut my name. This gap may be seen at a considerable distance, and there is no other.
The warrior's path beckons northward past another gap, now known as the Narrows. But Walker turns west, following a river he names the Cumberland, after the British Duke who defeated the Scots at the Battle of Culloden. He also gives this very name to the mountain and the gap that cuts through it. Walker follows the river westward for a week, but finds no inviting lands, just tangled woods rich with game. He returns to Virginia in July, and in frustration gives a negative report to the Loyal Company on the lands beyond the mountains. Walker has failed in his mission, but has accomplished a far greater result. He has found the Great Gateway to the west, has placed it on a map, has given it a name. Others will follow. One extraordinary man who follows Walker's trail through the gap is a 34-year-old long hunter from the Yadkin Valley of North Carolina. Traversing past the last settlement known as Martin Station, beyond the White Rocks and Powell's Valley leading to the Cumberland Gap, he heads westward. His name is Daniel Boone. This promised land to the west has fascinated him for a decade. The fabled Contacay, meaning Great Meadows, is a hunter's paradise, teeming with vast herds of buffalo, deer, and elk, has become his personal obsession. Traveling with his brother Squire and several others, he first locates Cumberland Gap in 1769. Boone sees the future beyond the Alleghenies, the future for a man, for his family, for his people, for his nation, and he is determined to seize it. In time, this will bring him immortality, as an American Moses blazing a trail for others to follow. And through his personal travail, a pioneer nation will find its own creation narrative. The long hunter follows the warrior's path north until on June 6, 1769, he stands in awe atop Pilot's Knob to view his promised land. It is all he has dreamed of, and more.
From atop an eminence, we saw with pleasure the beautiful level of Kentucky. We found everywhere abundance of wild beasts of all sorts through this vast forest. The buffalo were more frequent than I have seen cattle in the settlements. Sometimes we saw hundreds in a drove, and the numbers about the salt springs were amazing. In this forest, the habitation of beasts of every kind natural to America, we practice hunting with great success. I returned home to my family with a determination to bring them as soon as possible to live in Kentucky, which I esteemed a second paradise, at the risk of my life and fortune.
It is the first year of the American Revolution. Boone leads his wife Rebecca, their children, along with 3 other families and 17 young men through Powell's Valley toward the Cumberland Gap. But this valley is now a dark memory for Daniel and Rebecca. It haunts them still, and always will. 2 years before, Cherokee and Creek warriors had waited in ambush when Boone had first led his family and 5 other families into Powell's Valley toward the Gap in the autumn of 1773.
I'll be fine, Father. I'll see you tomorrow then.
Boone's firstborn, 16-year-old James, along with 5 others, trailed behind the main party. It was morning when Indian warriors caught up with them. The dead were hurriedly buried as Boone's party retreated back to North Carolina. 6 months later, a solitary figure returned to Powell's Valley. Finding that wolves had disturbed the boy's grave, Boone reburied his boy's remains still deeper in the soil. He kept a lonely vigil, weeping over the grave as a storm raged overhead.
Many dark and sleepless nights have I been a companion of owls, an instrument ordained to settle the wilderness.
Undeterred by the death of James, Daniel has allied himself with Judge Richard Henderson of Virginia, who also dreams of settlements on the Kentucky River. Months earlier, Henderson had sent Boone and 30 axemen to hack out a larger passageway out of the ancient warrior's path, beyond the gap. They quickly built Fort Boonesborough just south of the Kentucky River. Boone then returned to North Carolina to bring this first wave of immigrants to their promised land. With the American Revolution erupting on all sides, they are all now prepared to move beyond the mountains to Boone's fort, which stands as the far outpost of liberty in the wilderness. Those who follow Daniel Boone are all firmly for independence. They come from many lands and from all walks of life. They carry all they own on their backs or loaded on scrawny pack animals. They are impoverished yet proud, determined to build a better life in a new land, if not for themselves, then for their children. The next morning, Boone leads his party through the Cumberland Gap. It is the beginning of a grand human migration to the west. Like Boone, their leader, they are mostly illiterate, barely able to scrawl their own names. Yet they will leave to generations yet unborn a grand record, a legacy won by toil and blood. No forest primeval can restrain them. No mountain barrier can stop them. They press forward, ever forward, the first to penetrate into a bountiful wilderness that will sustain the rise of a great nation. Surrounded by an ancient forest of chestnut, maple, and hemlock, Boone leads them through the Cumberland Gap over the 400-foot climb to the saddle. This is a struggle both spiritual as well as physical, as they follow the ancient trace to the Narrows, 9 miles away. From that second great gap, they follow Boone's primitive road to the land of Great Meadows, some 116 miles away. They have left everything behind and now face the unknown. The dark and bloody ground promised to Boone by a wise old Cherokee years before. The journey is but the beginning of a long and terrible struggle.
Thank you.
Every cabin built, every field planted, will be contested. It is a time of risk and sacrifice, of fire and sword. Warriors take a heavy toll on the three tiny outposts of Harrodsburg, Logan Station, and Boonesboro. It is a time of heroes, as the names of Harrod, Clark, Kenton, and above them all, Boone, become famous across America's frontier. Raiding parties, both red and white, move across the Ohio, waging an unrelenting, brutal war, until both sides have paid a terrible price in blood for this land.
We're gonna try and catch him, Mom.
Please be safe.
The final Indian raid comes in August 1782. Boone and his 21-year-old son Israel join in the pursuit of the retreating foe. But at the Blue Licks, the Indians spring a perfect trap, and over 70 Kentuckians fall. Including Israel Boone, shot by his father's side. The price of Kentucky is finally proven too high, even for Boone.
My footsteps have often been marked with blood. 2 darling sons and a brother have I lost. I now live in peace and safety, enjoying the sweets of liberty and the bounties of providence in this delightful country, which I have seen purchased with a vast expense of blood and treasure.
In time, Boone's dream is lost, rent asunder by civil war. The Cumberland Gap becomes a focal point for defense for both blue and gray. An American Gibraltar, declares one general, until the grandson of one who had followed Boone through the gap and up the wilderness road redeems the dream and restores hope to the land. At the turn of the last century, the nation's greatest historian, Frederick Jackson Turner, sees in the story of Cumberland Gap the perfect metaphor for the story of the American people. Writing in 1893, he speaks to a people proud of their frontier past and uncertain of their industrial future. He gives to them a sense of bold nationalism that they, in turn, pass on to their children, and their children's children. Stand at Cumberland Gap and watch the procession of civilization, marching single file. The buffalo following the trail to the salt springs, the Indian, the fur trader, and the hunter, the cattle raiser, the pioneer farmer, and the frontier has passed by.